Hey, Archie, I'm starting to get a little nervous about the markets, and I don't know how much risk I've taken. Is that a problem?
Well, Rob, it certainly can be, but let's talk about it. Weekly wisdom to help you retire and stay that way. This is Last Paycheck. Welcome back to the Last Paycheck Podcast, brought to you by Hoxton Planning and Management. We're your hosts, CFP professionals Archie Hoxton and Rob Hoxton. And today, we're going to talk about investment risk. And more specifically, kind of a question that I think is important to ask ourselves. And it's, how do you know how much risk you're comfortable taking? And then how do you know how much risk you're actually taking? And can you match these together? It's really easy to have discrepancy in how much you're comfortable taking compared with how much you're actually taking. I think that's a really, really important thing to know so that you don't get surprised when the market turns sour. And it's an easy thing to not know.
Yeah, Archie, when the markets are going up like they have been for, a few years now, it's really easy to like investment risk.
Yeah.
Right? Because investment risk is what makes the portfolio go up faster.
Right.
You take no risk, you get no return.
Right.
So you take more risk, and in a positive market, you get more return, in theory. It's when the market turns and goes the other way that everyone realizes suddenly, oh my gosh, I hate risk. And it's interesting. In fact, I've read that people are 2.5 times as concerned about losing money as they are excited about making money.
Yeah.
So there's this sort of uneven relationship between gains and losses and the way that we experience risk.
Yeah. Well, because a lot of times when we're experiencing gains and the markets are going well, you're not really thinking much about it. You don't hear much about it. You just say, hey, things are chugging along nicely. I'm moving towards my big goals, and that's great. But when the markets are not doing well and you see that sudden drop in your account values, it's like, oh, then you start seeing the news everywhere. Oh no, and people are coming out saying, this is the big crash. This is 1929 all over again. And you get sort of this fear-mongering that happens in the media, and then there's just the behavioral side of it that it stings more.
It makes it feel like it's permanent too. And we all know that down markets are temporary, and those down or bear markets have always been much shorter than the good markets, the bull markets.
Right.
And it's interesting in so many years of doing this, we have not evolved very much. If you think about, back when we were, wearing animal skin clothes and hunting with spears and picking berries to survive, when we would step out into the field and suddenly a predator would appear, that saber-toothed tiger, I don't know if they were around when humans were around or not, probably not, but when that predator would show up and you would see it, the response is to run and run fast, right? And that's the opposite response that you probably should have when it comes to investing. But the key is to making sure that the amount of risk that you're taking is an amount of risk that you can stomach when the invariable bear market comes.
Yeah. Well, and understanding investment risk is a complicated thing because the whole world of investing is kind of big and complex, and for many people just kind of intimidating, and they'd rather hire someone to do it, or pick a couple of relatively simple mutual funds or something in their 401k and say, I'm going to put it there, set it and forget it. But so it's hard to know, what would happen if we had the 2008 financial crisis happen all over again? With these funds I have in my 401k, what would happen to them? These are important questions to ask. And if you have a combination of funds, each one's going to do something different. So it's important to know or at least have a sense of,
So,
are
yeah,
you okay
so
with what would happen?
so you have to ask yourself, when we have another really bad market, how much is your account going to go down? Is it going to go down more or less than the stock market, more or less than the bond market? How much is it going to go down? How much is it likely to go down? Do you know? If you're working with an advisor, does your advisor know? There's a good chance that they don't. There's a good chance that they don't. They can guess,
Mm-hmm.
but unless they're using some pretty sophisticated tools which many advisors aren't using yet, they probably don't know.
Yeah, it depends. And so but it's important to educate yourself, especially, and I think it's fair to assume that, like we said, bull markets last a lot longer than bear markets. It is really easy to over or underestimate the risk that you're taking. There's an old saying, a rising tide raises all ships. Super easy to do well and be happy in bull markets.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them can last, and the longest ones last, a decade. That's a long time to be very comfortable and not have to worry about, is my portfolio too risky for me? That's also a long time to approach retirement. You could go from 50 where, you've got still 10 years to 60 where maybe you're looking to retire in the next couple years. And if your portfolio hasn't changed at all through your own management and reducing the risk intentionally, you could end up in a bear market and realizing, wow, I was not expecting this kind of volatility. So it's just so important, and to get an assessment and to educate yourself on the types of investment that you're making and the different risk characteristics.
Yeah, I mean, there are tools to do that. And since you use the analogy of a rising tide raises all ships, I'll use a similar analogy about tides that Warren Buffett always used to talk about. And that's that it's only when the tide goes out that you know who's swimming without trunks.
Yeah.
So the point of that analogy is that right now the tide is pretty high. And it seems pretty easy to make money in your investments. That tide will go out, and you want to make sure that you understand how exposed or naked you might be when the tide goes out. And so you want to use those tools. We happen to have some tools that we use that give us, a pretty good idea of how much downside there might be in a portfolio, as well as how much upside there might be in a particular type of market condition.
And this data is out there for everybody to use. What's important is to look at what your portfolio is, a unique mix of funds that you have chosen or that your advisor has chosen. The tricky part is is getting a sense. You might have to kind of get into the ballpark. If 70% of your portfolio is allocated to a diversified basket of stocks, you can get a pretty good sense of what would happen, but maybe not a perfect sense. Because there are multiple ways to manage risk in a portfolio. There's asset allocation, right? How much do you have in each asset class? How much do you have in stocks? How much do you have in bonds? If you have real estate in the portfolio, how much there? So if you have a good sense of that you can use the mix of these different investments to manage risk. The other one is diversification. All right. So if stocks are a higher risk and higher reward investment, if owning one single stock is much higher risk and much higher reward potentially than owning a basket of stocks. So you can actually, by adding more investments to your portfolio and diversifying, you're decreasing the level of risk in the portfolio. And if you're doing it right, you're also preserving the kind of expected return that you can get you're not making too great a sacrifice in return if you're diversifying well, but you're still managing the risk.
That risk is called unsystematic risk, which is risk associated with any particular say if it's a stock, a particular company, or a bond, a particular government or company that's issuing the bond. So if that company or government falls on hard times and the value of that investment instrument drops, if you don't have all of your money in that one instrument, and you've got it spread out, then you've got some protection. The other type of risk which you mentioned is that you can protect yourself against is systematic risk, which is risk associated with the entire system. So there are times when there's a financial crisis or a credit crisis where pretty much all stocks go down in value. There's no way to completely diversify out of that. The only way you can do it is to avoid it or to ride the wave and come out on the other side. Because again, as you mentioned, those types of markets are temporary.
Yeah.
And though the press and the internet and whatever you might be reading, your friends that are investing as well, they may lead you to believe that this time is different and that these losses are permanent. Well, they're only permanent if you sell.
Right.
And as you mentioned, bear markets tend to be relatively short experiences, whereas bull markets, expanding markets tend to be very long and multi-year in nature.
So I think there's a couple of questions that you can ask yourself and do some research or talk to an advisor to get a sense. And because like we said before, there's often a disconnect between what we think we're comfortable with and what we're actually doing in our portfolio. There's also often a disconnect between what we think is reasonable to expect and kind of what we actually should expect based on what we need to accomplish our goals, right? You can't take no risk and expect to be able to outpace inflation and meet your goals. You have to take some risk. But it's about finding the balance. So understanding, okay, well, what's based on the portfolio that has the expected return that I need to achieve my goals, what's the worst case scenario? What would have happened had I owned this portfolio during the financial crisis, right? During the dot-com bubble, during COVID or the inflation of 2022? What would have happened in that? And am I comfortable with that? Because sometimes, you just have to say, there is no situation where I don't have some risk in my life when it comes to my money. If I take no risk, then inflation's going to eat up my money. And that's a risk in and of itself. It's a decision through indecision.
Yeah, most people can't save enough money to overcome that.
Yeah.
It's like having a sweater hanging in a closet full of moths,
Mm-hmm.
A month later, you're going to come back and there's going to be almost no sweater left. That's what
Right.
inflation does to your portfolio. It just eats away at it.
Right. But you also don't have to take, and you probably shouldn't take, an extremely high level of risk. There's a middle ground. But it's important to know what's realistic, right? If I want to take, if I want to be very, very, very conservative because I don't like, what could happen in a bear market, then maybe you have to be comfortable with, maybe the expected rate of return on a portfolio like that is only 4%. And, you still have some downside risk.
And you have control. I mean, the levers that you pull are you decide if you're going to do that you work a little longer and you save a little more.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you do have some control there.
Yeah. Spend a little less, be more conservative in other aspects of your life. Yeah. I mean, there's trade-offs with it, but this is where it's important to know, like, what rate of return do I need in order to be successful? And what downside risk do I have to accept and know going into it in order to enact this successful financial plan? So this is a really important thing, and I think it's probably a blind spot for many of us. And it's easy, like we said, to just kind of cruise through good markets, bull markets, and think, this is great. And then all of a sudden think, wow, I should have spent a little bit more time figuring out how much risk I was taking.
Before the bear market comes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're 3 years into a very strong market.
Yeah.
This is an opportunity to kind of get a handle on this
Yeah.
before the reckoning comes, because it'll be temporary, but it may be painful.
Yeah. And it always has. I mean, Peter Lynch had a great educational video a while back.
Peter Lynch being
He was
the storied manager from Fidelity Funds, right?
Yeah, he managed the Magellan Fund. He's got all kinds of great books and cool ideas about investing. Very brilliant guy. He talked about how it's really simple to understand what's going to happen in the markets regarding bear markets. Every couple years, expect a correction, right? On average, every 2, maybe 3 years, we get a 10% decline in the stock market or more. Every 5 or 6 years, we get a 20% decline or more in the markets. If you know that, right, you know what to expect and how, generally in history, the intervals of bull and bear markets, and then the time that they last. So when that comes around, as long as you have planned ahead and have a sense of what you're comfortable in terms of risk and the fluctuation in your portfolio you can stomach, then hey, this is normal part of the cycle. I'm just going to keep on chugging. In fact, I'm going to buy some more.
Yep.
And
hold your nose and invest a little more and let things happen the way you're supposed to, and it'll recover.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that's about all we have for today. This is a great topic. Love to hear you all's thoughts on it in the comments, or if there's another topic you want to hear about, let us know in the comments. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, hit the bell for notifications so you know when we put out new content, and share it with your family and friends. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time. You've been watching Last Paycheck, weekly wisdom to help you retire and stay that way. If you like this show, be sure to hit like and subscribe. Last Paycheck is available anywhere you get your podcasts.